My friends, what is hamburger? Chopped ham? No, it's chopped steak. Welcome to the Classic Guitar Rock Daily Update. It is Thursday, December 14th, 2023. And as promised, we've got Geddy Lee news. Geddy Lee, he's a media juggernaut. He's got his My Effin' Life thing going on. And now, I don't know if you guys were aware of this, he's got a TV show. He's got a series on Paramount Plus. It's called Geddy Lee Asks, Are Bass Players Human Too? And the whole idea of this series, and I think there's only 4 episodes, but maybe there'll be more. He interviews and spends time with bass players. Interesting. And the idea is that, hey, there's more to bass players than just playing the bass. I mean, for Geddy, for instance, huge baseball fanatic. He's been interviewed just about his baseball stuff too. He's a bird watcher, all kinds of stuff. So across 4 episodes on Paramount Plus, he goes out and he interviews other notable bass players. He goes to rural Washington, and I'm in Washington. He goes to rural Washington with Chris Novoselic of Nirvana. Is that how you say the guy's name? I don't know. Or he goes and visits Robert Trujillo from Metallica. Les Claypool, I think he spent some time with. But I haven't seen any episodes yet. I'm looking forward to it. So you can now check out Geddy Lee on the small screen as he interviews other bass players. It's good for bass players to be able to, have an outlet, because they're not near as cool as guitar players or drummers. So, I mean, it's good for bass players to have this camaraderie. Ozzy Osbourne has revealed that he has never been completely keen on the idea of being called the godfather of metal, or even being called a heavy metal act. He doesn't see himself as a full-on heavy metal artist at all, despite being, part of Black Sabbath, which many think invented heavy metal. Ozzy says, quote, "Well, I've never felt comfortable about that title that they put on me, metal, because Ozzy Osbourne plays heavy, but the bands that are considered metal are really heavy, and we're all put in the same category. When you get pigeonholed with a certain genre, it can be very difficult to do something a bit lighter, or an acoustic track, or whatever you want to do. Back in the day, it was always just rock music. It's still just rock music." And he has a great point. I mean, even over the course of my lifetime, popular radio, right? AM radio, FM radio, in the later 70s, but AM radio, you would hear something heavy, right? You might hear a Ted Nugent song, and then you'd hear a Carpenters song, all on the same station, right? And that's the way it used to be. It was a lot broader net that you would hear on the radio. And to be honest, I kind of miss that, right? Now things are way more formatted, segmented, separated by genres. So he's got a great point there. In a new interview with Chris Aiken Presents, I'm not sure who Chris Aiken is and not sure what he presents, but in this particular presentation, he sits down with Mick Mars. Mick, remember, just yesterday, he released the new single, and it's really good. The Right Side of Wrong, I think is what it's called. I really like it. So Mick Mars spoke about his ongoing battle with a degenerative disease, ankylosing spondylitis. It's called AS. It's a type of arthritis that causes inflammation in the spine joints and ligaments and can lead to stiffness over time, according to the National Institute of Arthritis and Musculoskeletal and Skin Diseases. Okay. He said, quote, "When I see myself, especially on the past couple of years, like the farewell tour," remember there was a Motley Crue farewell tour? It really wasn't a farewell tour. And I see myself on film. I absolutely am not digging it at all. I don't look like the way I look. I don't like the way I can't move. I was like, I can look down on my guitar, but I can't bend my head to see. So I have to look down. And when I walk on stage, it looks like a praying mantis with the guitar or something. It's kind of messed up. It's hard for me to look at myself that way because I don't feel that way, but I see it. He says, my brain's as sharp as ever. These new ideas, this is a weird way to explain it. My brain, my mind, my ideas are expanding beyond what I figured, but it's still my idea, my creativity. The stuff is growing as a solo artist, and I'm not in this shell confined to one type of sound. This stuff, if it was any different, wouldn't sound right. I can do anything I want, take it where I want. And if people are digging it, I'm loving it. And if they're not, it's okay too, because that's what's in my mind. Now, here's the thing about Mick. Mick's about 10 years older, at least 10 years older than the other guys in Motley Crue. He's in his late 70s, got to be in his late 70s. He might be pushing 80. And if the singles we've heard so far, any indication, I think that him leaving Motley Crue, and I'll be honest, the way they let him go, the way he left, I think we all felt sorry for Mick. And you know, if you're choosing a good guy and a bad guy in that whole thing, I think most of us thought Motley Crue they were being jerks, right? But I think based on what I'm hearing from Mick, what I've heard, I think it's good for him. I think it'll be a good thing. And one of the sticking points with Motley Crue was because of his condition, it was hard for him to physically do a tour, you know, and stand up and do a show. And, you know, that led to the whole, you know, did he quit? Was he fired? The more we found out, it looks more like he was pushed out than he retired. He kind of said he was retiring, but they were twisting his arm. Anyways, it's a complicated thing. We hate to see the bands that we like fighting. They brought in John Five. John Five's a great guy, so it really has nothing to do with John Five. But I think as we look back, it will be a good thing for Mick, and I think he's recognizing that. We'll see how this new album does. The Other Side of Mars will be released on February 23rd. And 2 singles so far. First one, it's okay, but the one yesterday was really good. So I'm anxious to see what this is going to be like. Speaking of, speaking of Motley Crue, bassist Nikki Sixx, speaking to People Magazine, talks about maintaining a primary residence in Wyoming. So a few years ago, he moved to Wyoming, the least populous U.S. state. I live in eastern Washington, okay, right next to northern Idaho, and then you got Montana, and then you got Wyoming down there underneath Montana. And guys, I shouldn't say this. That part of the country, right? Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, it's beautiful. And there aren't many people. And it's a wonderful place to live. I own a place in western Montana, and it's awesome. And so when you see, and there's a lot of famous people that come out and they buy land. I have a cousin who, you know, buys and sells buffalo back and forth with David Letterman, right, in Montana. So there's a lot of wealthy folks that are discovering this part of the country, the I won't call it the Pacific Northwest, the Mountain West, right? Idaho, Wyoming, Montana, a lot of land, not a lot of people. And so there's a lot of people that are making the move out here. And Bruce Kay chimes in and says, shh, hush, don't let the secret out. And that's exactly what it is. I won't say any more, Bruce. I won't say any more. But there's a reason that a lot of people are moving to these parts of the country, and COVID made it well, depending on how you look at it, made it better or worse, right? People were realizing that their jobs could be done from home. Many companies moved their workforces home and had a lot of people working from home, and those folks still work at home. And then when you're working at home, you're realizing, hey, I can do this anywhere. So I can move out of Southern California where there's violence and crime and all this bad stuff going on, and I can live in the mountains. And people that have the wherewithal to do that are doing that. So sorry, Bruce. I won't say anything else. That's the last thing I'm going to say. But Nikki Sixx has made that move, right? And Wyoming is beautiful. He says it just really clears our head and allows us to reset. We spend a lot of time outside. I mean, the whole point of being here is to really be outside, whether you're into skiing or fishing or hiking or being up on the lakes or snowmobiling. So yeah, that's why he made the move. And many Hollywood people, entertainment people, have places all around in the middle of nowhere in Montana and Wyoming and southern Idaho and northern Idaho. So it is what it is. You can't blame them, right? In a brand new interview with Justin Young of Monsters, Madness, and Magic, Don Dokken was asked if he and his Dokken bandmates will continue performing live, even though he has publicly stated that the group's recently released 13th studio album, Heaven Comes Down, will be Dokken's last. Quote, we'll keep touring. I've done a lot of interviews. I've been doing interviews when I'm off the road, and I tell them this is our last record, and that's true, but we're not going to stop touring. I mean, there's nothing I can do. Let me read you the quote and we'll talk about this. I'm hoping the surgeon that screwed my life up will get run over by a bus. He really screwed me up. He's referencing the complications from a November 2019 neck and spinal surgery. Quote, it took a year for me to be able to raise my hand above my head. So I was depressed. Obviously, I came home. I was in a walker. I'm in a cane. And yeah, it sucked, man. But the bottom line is I would love to keep going as Dokken, but I can't write any more songs. I'm screwed. I took my Steinway piano and shipped it to Los Angeles because my daughter is a concert trained pianist. She was happy to get that. But I don't know how I can write another record. And according to Don, he was the writer, right? He wrote everything in Dokken. And he says they didn't. Let me get it right here. He says, I was talking to John Levin the other day. John Levin is the current guitarist in Dokken, who sounds more like George Lynch than George Lynch does. I said, if this album is successful, you want to do another one? And he said, I don't know if I have it in me. I'm the writer. I'm the singer, just like I was in Dokken. I'm not throwing my old guys under the bus, but I was the main writer. I wrote the hits, In My Dreams, It's Not Love, Alone Again, The Hunter. Even though when you look at the record credits and it says Don Dokken, George Lynch, Jeff Pilson, Mick Brown, they didn't write those songs. And everybody knows in my camp that I wrote the songs, the guitar and the lyrics. Those other three guys were in Orange County with an ounce of cocaine trying to come up with some good songs. And that's why I couldn't write with them, because I don't do drugs. Never did. Heaven Comes Down. We talked about that. That came out on October 27th. And I like it. I like the album. I mentioned that Don's vocals are he's not 30 anymore. He's like 71 years old. So his vocal approach is a lot more restrained. The music is great. The production sounds great. Good songs. So good luck with him on that. All right. Let me share with you one of my favorite albums. You guys know I have professed my love for Michael Schenker to you all before. I love Michael Schenker. If not my favorite guitarist, he's in the top 2 for sure. This album, it's kind of an outlier in the Schenker catalog. This is Assault Attack, came out in 1982. Why is it an outlier? Well, first of all, here's the if you want to call it a problem, here's the problem with Schenker albums, the Michael Schenker group. It's literally a revolving door. Okay. You can't, I mean, he's had, how many singers has he had? 15? How many bass players has he had? How many drummers? I mean, the first few albums, the first 4 albums are the closest to the Michael Schenker group being an actual real band. But even there were revolving characters. And when you do that, especially with singers, when you've had 15 different singers, there's no identity, right? People hear a song. Who is that? People recognize bands based on the vocalist. You instantly know it's AC/DC when you hear Brian Johnson. And particularly folks that aren't musicians or recognize guitar styles or whatever, it's the singer. So Michael Schenker has had so many different singers. This album, he has one of my favorite singers ever, the great Graham Bonnet. Graham had just left Rainbow, and he came and he did this one album. And it was awkward. It was awkward because Gary Barden, who was the previous singer, had done the first 2 Michael Schenker albums. They fired him. They said, "Hey, we need someone that's a little more known than you, Gary. Hit the road. We want Graham Bonnet." So Graham Bonnet comes in. They produced this album, Assault Attack, which is my favorite Michael Schenker group album. It's an awesome album. And then they proceed to go on tour. And to make a long story short, Graham Bonnet has a wardrobe malfunction. Yeah. And he flashes the entire audience, and he was super drunk. And anyways, they fire him after that incident. And they call Gary, "Gary, can you come back? Can you come back? I know we fired you before because we wanted someone bigger. Well, we got to fire him because he's flashing people. And can you come back?" So Gary Barden comes back. The album after this one, Gary Barden's back. So kind of awkward. So Gary Barden doesn't record this album, but then he has to go and do most of the tour. I think Graham only did like a couple dates when they toured this album. What's my point? My point is, all that drama aside, this is a phenomenal album produced by Martin Birch, who's worked with everyone, Black Sabbath, Iron Maiden. It's a great album. And I've mentioned this before. It's a chrysalis album, however you say that. All my favorite albums tend to be chrysalis albums. But listen to this right now. Turn this off. Okay, you have my permission to just turn this update off to go listen to this album. You can do it. All right, guys, thank you so much for tuning in to the Classic Guitar Rock Daily Update. We'll do it all again tomorrow. Live long and prosper. Bye-bye.